Hi everyone, it's Erin here from erinelizabethdesigns. Today we're going to sit down and do a finish together. So this is my Woodland Critters tier. I have two of it because when I first started stitching the model, I started it on the Jade 18 count Ada by Picture This Plus. And as I love it on there, I did it with one thread. I love it on that fabric. It just wasn't popping enough for showing the detail of the stitch and giving enough contrast for photographing it. So I kind of changed my mind on fabric and ended up going with the Mystic Blue. I did it in a 14 count and did 2 strands just so that I would have a really nice representation of the chart for that cover photo. Um, but I already had about 2 tiers of this stitched and I did not want to waste that. So I went ahead, finished that 3rd tier, and we are going to go and do something a little different with this. As you can see, I left off that bottom pedestal and the extra detail along the bottom, and we're going to finish it into a tree today. So I've got a backer fabric and some lightweight fusible interfacing there that we are going to put on the front and the back of the pillow to give it a little bit more extra stabilization. Right now I'm just going to give about an inch spacing off the bottom layer of the tier of my fabric. I was thinking about probably leaving half an inch space around the stitch so that it has some room to breathe and can allow for that pillow shape to really take form without the stitch um, disappearing into like the seams and stuff. All right, so now that I have that fabric off of the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and figure out what shape of a triangle I want here. I want it to be following the line of the stitches. It kind of has a pretty even triangle shape there to it already naturally. So I'm just going to find the center of the fabric to start, and I'm using a fabric pen here, one that's disappears with water, just to give a little mark at the bottom and the top of my fabric so that I know where the center of the fabric is. And then from there, we're going to go and figure out what kind of an angle of a triangle we want. So I'm just going to put the ruler at the top of that top mark, and I'm going to move it around until I find the right angle. Nice and tight up to that stitching to kind of see exactly where I want it. So from there, I'm going to make that mark on the bottom where that hits. And then that is, so from top to bottom, that is as tight as I can go to the stitches without compromising the stitching. So from there, I'm going to make a mark 1/2 inch out. That'll give us some room to do like a 1/2 inch or a little less of a seam allowance, depending again how tight you want it to your stitches. So now I'm measuring the bottom, how wide it is from that center to the first mark and how wide it is from that first mark to the next. I'm going to give that extra 1/2 inch again there on that side. So now that we've got our markings, I'm going to go ahead and just mark with my fabric pen from the 1/2 inch out on either side. So I have a really good idea of what this angle is going to look like before I go ahead and cut. I like to always mark because it gives you a better idea. And like I say, I can put water on there, spray it with some water, and it'll just disappear. Once it's cut, it's cut. So now I'm just folding over those edges so I can see what that's going to look like. In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have done a little bit more, which we'll see as we go further, but it did work out really well in the end. So now that I'm happy with it, I'm going to go ahead and trim that extra fabric off. And then from here, we're going to go and do our interfacing. So I'm going to put interfacing on the top and the bottom or back of this piece just because it is like a standing form, I want it to have a little bit more stabilization to it and keep its shape and everything a little bit more. I generally, with stuff like pillows and things, I do like to put interfacing on the stitching just to help protect those stitches, especially while you're stuffing the pillow, using your chopstick to get the stuffing in there. I just always like to make sure that my stitching is protected. So I've just put that piece right on top of a piece of interfacing, and now I am cutting it to fit to size. So as you can see, I cut it exactly the same shape as the front piece, and then I just slid it down to give myself the amount of seam allowance I wanted, and we're gonna cut one, and then so see how it gives me perfect amount of seam allowance there, and I'm gonna cut a second one now that I've got that shape, and we'll have one for the front and back. So I went with a nice green here for the backing fabric, and again, I'm just going to use the stitch piece to give me the exact same, because it's a different shape and stuff. It's easy to just put on top and cut beside, like cut the same shape again. All right, so we're going to get that backing fabric cut out, and um, I will say when I went in, I kind of wish I would have given myself a smidge bit more. Normally, I do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. On finishes and pieces that I'm doing for the first time, sometimes I like to do the 1/2 inch because it gives me that extra wiggle room. Well, I'm really glad I did on this one, because in hindsight, I would have given myself just a little bit more breathing space for my stitches. I'll say one thing, the tiers, there's stitching is not symmetrical. So for this particular piece, I measured on the left-hand side of the stitch and when I was doing the angling, and I forgot to kind of do a comparison with the right-hand side. You guys will see coming up here as I place the interfacing over top, it is tight to my little bunny's ear. So I'll show you guys in a minute here, but I'm just getting them, kind of planning it out. I'm going to do stitching down the sides and then a little in on the base on either side, leaving the center open so I can flip it in and out. But see, you can see there that the middle by the owl was wider, and that's kind of my point that gave me that angle. On the other side, the bunny's ear sticks out a little bit more, and it got a little tight. So in because I had a larger margin, it worked out okay. It worked out fine. I did a 1/4 inch seam allowance. The only thing that changed, it just gave me enough space. The only thing that changed with doing a 1/4 inch is that the top of my tree was still open because it was expected to do like a 1/2 inch. So I just ended up going back and rounding that in to that peak at a little bit different of a pitch. So keep that in mind. I should have measured on both sides and kind of gone from that, but in the end, it worked out well. Um, it just I just didn't account for that little ear on that bunny in the first planning of it. So, all right, so now I'm trying to decide. I've got a bunch of all these things are things I've collected from the dollar store. So I found these little wooden spools, some dowels. I found these bamboo straws that I bought one time thinking, oh, these would be perfect for tree finishes or any, those kinds of things. Um, so there's lots of different options if you're looking for that kind of stuff. And right now I'm just trying to figure out what size dowel should I use. Um, I was thinking these spools would make a really cute little tree trunk. And all of these items are the raw wood from the dollar store, so they do stain up really nice. Sometimes they need a little sanding or anything if they're a little rough cut. but they stain really nice. So I'm going to go with that route today. And it's just a matter of like me right now figuring out what I like the look of. Two spools stacked, one spool, which size dowel, just a straight dowel, all those kinds of things. So I am going to fill my tree pillow with polyfiber fill today, and that's all I'm going to use for this one. It's a freestanding little pillow. I didn't want to use any like of the pellets or the um, lizard litter in this particular one. So polyfiber fill was definitely the route to go for me. So we're just going to get this nice and full, making sure that we get that fiber fill right into the point of the tree at the top, and the side points as well on the base. We're going to get them nice and full, so that they hold their shape. A chopstick works great for this. I'm using a piece of dowel because it was right there. Whatever you have. And you can see here I'm kind of flattening it out. I do want this to be a nice full little pillow, but I also want it to kind of be a little on the flatter side so that you can still see all the nice stitching and the shape of it as well. I don't want it to be like rounded out as much. So I did do a small stitch from the corner in and just left that base open on my sewing machine. So there's a little bit of the stitch there, and I am now just with my fingers finger pressing that seam in and really getting that nice crisp line along the bottom. I found the Wonder Clips here to be really helpful and handy to kind of, once I got it into place, they really are the best to clamp it together and hold it in place. So I'm just getting everything exactly nice and smooth down where I want it to be, having a look at it. I'm gonna go and hand sew this closed. I'm still going to leave the tiniest little opening in the center for the dowel to slip in there, and then we're going to put that right up to the tip of the tree so that there's nice structure to it and good stabilization. So now I'm just going and hand sewing up that bottom seam. I did choose a DMC thread that matched the front fabric. I figured if I was going to see some stitches, I would want them to be more invisible on the front than as opposed to the back of on the back fabric, because it's going to be facing forward. We don't want to see any of those stitches. But I will say, you guys, that I was pretty impressed with my hand stitching here. So I'm getting better. The more you do it, the better you get, right? So it was yeah, pretty easy to do. Like I say, just leave a tiny little gap in the center there. I am just tying off the thread now, and then once I tie that off, I'm gonna pull that thread just back through the pillow so that that little knot gets tucked inside. So we're gonna get that all finished up there, and now I'm just sort of testing out that dowel to see how it fits in there and what it looks like. As I'm doing that, I kind of realized I was poking around the stuffing a little bit more into the corners, especially those base corners, because it was a little bit tricky to do with a big opening still on the bottom. I kind of decided I wanted a little bit more filling. So here I am shoving through the tiniest little dowel hole. It actually wasn't too bad to do though, you guys. You really don't need that big of a hole to get that in there. So I just am making sure I get enough extra little fill in there to help those corners keep their shape. So just moving it around as I'm getting that little bit of filling to get in there. I'm just kind of constantly using that dowel to make it nice and firm. And this was actually really super satisfying to be able to get that through that little hole. So it worked out well, and I'm much happier with the shape of it. So always double check because it is hard to go back after everything's all sewn up and done. And here I'm kind of deciding on what spool. So that one is a bigger spool, and I thought, oh, it's too big and clunky for this little tiny tree. So I did decide to go with a small one. I kind of thought two would be nice to give it more space between the base. But after I go through and stain everything, I did end up deciding that one was plenty. See, I think it was this size I ended up choosing. So they're a little bit taller. Had I done two of the smaller ones, it probably would have been great. But once I got these done and everything kind of decided in the end, I did end up deciding to do just the one spool because it was kind of too tall for the size of the tree. And everything that I was going to do on the base of it. So I just sort of decided on my dowel. This is a pretty skinny dowel, so I just put like a little bit of a mark in there with my craft scissors, and then I just broke it on that line. I've got all these wood charm things that I've been collecting from the dollar store. So got a little acorn there, and I was just going through to see if there's anything. I wanted something extra on the base. Like, what extra could I add on the base? So a lot of like little leaves in here, the acorn. I had a little mushroom thing. Kind of went down the path of there's a mushroom in the tier design, so I wanted to kind of try to add something like that onto it. And we'll see where I end up going with that in a little bit here. So like I said, these things stain up really well. This is just a water-based stain. You guys have seen me use this before. I love it because there's no odor. I can use it inside and it washes up with water. Super easy to use. Gives me that nice color of stain. And these, again, if your wood, always check the wood if you feel like it needs a little bit of a sanding. Do that before you stain. Sometimes after staining too, you might even want to, the wood texture tends to kind of like puff up a little bit. So after you've stained, you might decide you want a little bit of a sanding. Keep those things in mind. I did not have to sand my pieces today. They were all smooth enough. So this one was actually pretty good, all things considered. So we're just going to stain that. That's going to be our base. And then we're doing the dowel that I used as a stir stick is, you're not going to see the dowel anyways because it's going inside the pillow, and I think this actually was a scrap piece of dowel anyways, this one. I don't know, it might be the one I ended up using, I can't remember. But it goes in the pillow and it's going to go inside these spools. So again, I found this to be an easy way to stain these little guys without getting my fingers too mucky. So that worked out well. And I'm going to stain the acorn as well. So we'll set these off to the side to dry. The acorn was a little trickier to do. It wanted to roll away on me. So while those are drying, I decided thought about doing the mushrooms. I went down the path of doing felt little mushrooms and stuff, and then I was like, well, I want something like three-dimensional to kind of sit on the base. And while I was thinking felt, I kind of saw that I had white and red buttons, and it just, why not stack some white buttons and then do some red? So we're doing, the base of the stem will be white of the mushroom. So we're going to go from like large to small, finding the right sizes here. And then the top we're going to do from large to small as well, but in the red. And this actually turned out to be probably one of my favorite little crafty things I've done in a while because they are so stinking cute. These would make really great, like if you're looking for like a floss drop charm or a bag charm or something like that, you could make these into little charms, a scissor fob or something. So for them, I just grabbed a piece of wire. This is just like, floral wire. Again, it's from the dollar store, and I cut a piece, folded it in half, and super simple. I have my buttons already kind of pre-stacked there and just fed that through the holes of the buttons. And there we have the top of our mushroom. Now we're going to start with the smallest white ones and we're going to add the base to it. I just think these were the perfect little touch to take this little tree finish from just being a tree into a complete little forest project. So they turned out wonderful. I'm so happy with it. I'm glad it came together as good as I thought it would. But they would make really awesome like little charms as well. Like if you wanted to do like a little charm for a bag or a scissor fob or something. I don't know, they're super cute. So I just folded over the wire and then just trimmed it off. These are going to get glued onto the base, so I didn't want anything extra bulky by twisting it. If your button has a little indent on the surface, the front of it, I would suggest putting that to the base so that you can tuck that wire in there. And look how those turned out. Aren't they so cute? They even have like a little wobble to them. You could form them in different shapes with the wire. You could do a bit bigger mushrooms. Like, really, the possibilities are endless with this. You could do a white stem with brown buttons on the top. Seriously, endless. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and get everything assembled together. We're checking that dowel in there. We've got our spools. I'm trying to debate one, two, all the good things. For the dowel, I decided to just get it in there with hot glue. So I found that that was going to just probably be the easiest. There's just the tiniest of little openings. So essentially I just need something to kind of keep it on that dowel. So I popped that seam open enough to get the tip of my glue gun in there and gave a little squirt of glue and then just pinched it down. Of course, when doing this, you want to make sure that your fabric doesn't like pucker or pull or get stuck down further than just that little opening surface. So I'm making sure everything's really good there before I decide, before the glue fully sets in. Getting any extra off, making sure that dowel is secure enough in there. All right, and I decided it needs just a tiny little dab more, and making, like I say, making sure I puff that pillow back out so there's no squishing of the glue on that batting, or fiber fill, I guess. This is the point where I decided that I wanted to go with just the one spool as the stem of the tree, the trunk of the tree. So I went and cut that dowel down to fit accordingly, and now I'm kind of getting an idea of like placement, where I want things to sit and how it's going to all come together. I found little greenery I thought would be cute to add, just to kind of, add that extra element in there. So we're more or less placing things, getting an idea, how is it going to fit, what am I going to want to do before I put anything permanently down. For this project, I have a quick dry wood glue that I'm going to use for the spool. I'm going to put some inside the spool for the dowel to glue in there. I'm going to glue the spool to the base. So here we go. We're going to glue the spool first to the base where I want it, and then I'm going to put a little bit in that center. And when I go put the dowel in there, it's going to push that down in there. I did do a second application to the middle. I kind of like put the dowel in, pulled it back out, put more glue in there, because my dowel's not like a full snug fit. It was a little bit smaller of a dowel, so I wanted to make sure I had enough glue in there that it wasn't ever going to be a problem of it coming apart. So now that that is nice and secure, we're going to go ahead and glue mushrooms on. I chose to go with a crazy glue. I chose Gorilla Glue. That's what I had on hand. I just thought that that would stick better with the buttons. And now I'm trimming up some of the little greenery to see how it's gonna kind of fit on there. The original size pieces were a little too big and springy. So we cut them down a little bit. And that is all looking great. Love how this pillow came together. It's really taking its form now, and time to get the forest meadow all put together. So we're just putting a little bit of glue around the buttons there to secure those on. My filming did cut out while I was doing that, so apologies, you guys, but I just crazy glue on the base and then found where I wanted them to go and stuck them on there. With the little sprigs of green here, I'm doing a little bit of hot glue and just placing those in behind the buttons. I'm gonna end up adding the little wooden acorn that I stained is gonna go in there, and for that I did just use hot glue. I chose not to go with the wood glue because it's round and it was rolling everywhere. I could just envision me trying to put it on with wood glue and it rolling away or moving. I love the instant satisfaction of hot glue. With it being just an extra decorative piece, if it ever did pop off in the future, I would just hot glue it back on, kind of thing. So I think it'll be more than sufficient, without making a huge mess, because I didn't see the wood glue being the right choice for me, with that little acorn. But adding this little extra greenery in here really just kind of gave the piece a little bit more life and texture, and kind of brought it all together. So this was a really fun, creative piece to put together. I love to think of different ways we can do finishes, and having an extra stitch laying around that's just sitting there is always fun to grab and experiment with. So don't be afraid to try something. Like I say, especially if you're doing something for the first time, give yourself more allowance with your stitches. Try it, and then you know for next time if you need to like decrease that allowance, or it's better to always, in my opinion, it's always better to have a little bit more space and room to work with than to go too much too quick. So I almost made that mistake with this one. Um, but there you go. A little acorn in there, and we have our little woodland forest. So I could not be happier with how this one came together. I hope you guys enjoyed it, as much as I did, and how it all came together. Hopefully there's some inspiration in there for you all.